Modern Warfare 2, a game tasked with following up the behemoth that was Call of Duty 4. COD 4 started a movement that had all eyes on the franchise, and World at War raised the bar even higher, with impossibly high expectations. Infinity Ward felt the pressure of the public weighing down on them. How do you create a story that can compare to the intensity of COD 4 and the passion of World at War? It may have been a seemingly impossible question to the public, but the developers had all the answers. MW2 delivers arguably the most successful story a sequel has ever told in gaming. The stakes are higher, the enemy twists your heroic actions in Modern Warfare's story to paint the United States as an enemy, and now you aren't only fighting extremists, it's full-scale global warfare. An even more cunning villain, Vladimir Makarov, is scheming behind the curtains, always one step ahead, and as the player, you really feel like he might win. The missions never once have a low point. It's just great after amazing after perfect. You could pretty much say any one of these missions in MW2 is in your top 10 for all of Call of Duty, and I don't think anyone would bat an eye. Not only is the overall story gripping, but the more subtle politics behind the scenes adds to the depth in a way we haven't seen before in Call of Duty. The twists and turns, the betrayals, the cunning manipulation, the developers left out nothing when writing this story. The character development throughout is yet another pillar that can't be forgotten. We see the return of familiar faces and plenty of new ones as well. The voice acting is spot on, the dialogue is iconic, the game is perfect. Man, I had a lot of fun with this one. That intro may have seemed like a ton of glazing, and honestly this whole video might be, but even for me, when I first loaded up the game, I was so nervous that a lot of my feelings towards this game were just based on nostalgia, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I have, and I honestly have found an even deeper appreciation for Modern Warfare 2. If you're new, this is a retrospective on the MW2 campaign where we'll go through mission by mission and talk through our thoughts on each one. We've already done Call of Duty 4 and World at War, so be sure to check those out as well. These videos do take a ton of time to make, so I would appreciate it if you would hit that subscribe button and leave a comment letting me know what you think or if you have any ideas for the future. Anyway, I'm glad you're here, and let's get into it. As we know, in Modern Warfare, the game ends with us finally taking down Imran Zakhaev alongside Captain Price. MW2 picks up 5 years later. With Zakhaev dead, you would think the war came to an end, but of course you would be wrong. Relations between Russia and the US are obviously strained to the max, and Vladimir Makarov has used Zakhaev's death to create a martyr for the ultranationalist movement. These extremists take over Russia, and Makarov commits to a life of vengeance against the West, which catches us up to the present day. As always, the story is told mostly through two characters. The first is a private in the Rangers named Joseph Allen. The second is a sergeant in the coveted Special Forces Unit Task Force 141. In the past, we kind of see one side of the story was often much more interesting than the other, like the Russian side in World at War, for example, and the 141 side of Modern Warfare. In MW2, they absolutely crush the stigma and deliver two compelling perspectives of the war that's about to unfold. Anyway, last little thing before we get going, the loading screens are very similar to those in Modern Warfare, and I just love this method of storytelling. All the visuals are super interesting and provide a great intro into where you are in the world and what you'll be doing. Alongside some of the greatest voice acting and written dialogue in the franchise, you'll definitely never be bored during these loading screens. A callback to the iconic intro/tutorial mission from COD 4, S.S.D.D is a similar tutorial-style mission, this time with the Rangers as you play as Private Allen. You take orders from Sergeant Foley while giving a demonstration of the basics to some new recruits. I appreciate the different style of intro here. Even though you are private, it's clear that Foley trusts you to demonstrate the correct way of doing things to the new guys. Not much else to say really, you learn the basics and then head over wandering freely to the pit. It's a cool minor thing that so much is going on while you walk through the camp. It does really make it feel immersive, and obviously if you know the story to come, you do have to take a second to avoid the atrocities that will happen, but as always, friendly fire isn't tolerated.
Okay, head on in.
Corporal Dunn gives you a rundown of the pit, which is just like the training course in COD 4, and depending on the time you achieve, it recommends you a difficulty. After finishing up the training course, you're on to the real deal. Basically every loading screen could be broken down for how amazing they are, from the visuals to the dialogue, and we'll see some clips now and then to emphasize that, but I'm going to let this one play out just to remind everyone of just how good these are.
We are
are the most powerful military force in the history of man. Every fight is our fight. Because what happens over here matters over there. We don't get to sit one out. Learning to use the tools of modern warfare is the difference between the prospering of your people and utter destruction. We can't give you freedom, but we can give you the know-how to acquire it. And that, my friends, is worth more than a whole army base of steel. Sure, it matters who's got the biggest stick, but it matters a hell of a lot more who's swinging it. This is a time for heroes, a time for legends. History is written by the victors. Let's get to work.
You load in to see General Shepard, the one that just gave that badass speech, reloading a revolver while standing straight up as explosions ring in your ears and gunfire riddles the earth around you. That, and his opening line, sets the tone immediately for the story to come. They achieve a tremendous amount of characterization and storytelling in the first 5 seconds of gameplay. Shepard isn't new to this war stuff. He's comfortable, and you, a part of the Rangers, will be diving headfirst into this new warfare alongside him. There won't be room for excuses or time to sit one out. Aside from that, all this mission really does is serve as an intro, or reintroduction back into modern warfare. The rules are different. You can't shoot until you're being shot at first. The enemy could be standing in plain sight right in front of you, but it also could just as well be a normal civilian. It won't be a fair fight. 1 second, a kid will be standing with his mom, watching the army trucks roll by, and next there will be 6 RPGs aiming at your truck from that same rooftop, just a few feet above the kid's head. It does a great job of establishing that urban warfare is horrifying. No, maybe there won't be any bonsai charges or booby traps that lead to spikes underground, but the fight will be just as dirty. You fight through the streets in a Humvee, and then on foot through a school, and Corporal Dunn's comment really lets it sink in. You're fighting in classrooms. This war will be just as unforgiving as the last, if not worse. After making it through to the end, you're back with Shepard, and he informs you that you'll be taking orders from him now. At first glance, it's easy to say this mission wasn't the best intro, or was a bit boring, and while I disagree, I will say that compared to the rest of the game, it probably is the most forgettable mission. However, I think it is the perfect intro exactly for the reasons I explained. It establishes every character on the Rangers side well, the intricacies of urban warfare were on full display, and obviously, it allows the player to get used to the game by providing several different types of gameplay. So with that said, while maybe not as memorable as something like Wet Works from Call of Duty 4, I still think this was the perfect start for MW2. After the relatively tame intro, Shepard tells Alan that he's going to be joining an elite force called the 141. Alan is tasked with going undercover to infiltrate Makarov's inner circle. Meanwhile, Alan asks when he'll get to meet the rest of the team, and you zoom in to an icy mountain range and take control of Roach.
It's an honor, sir. When do I meet the rest of the team?
They're on a mission recovering a downed ACS module behind enemy lines.
Their feet wet?
Imagine they're just about freezing right now.
McTavish gets his own badass moment here, letting the player know immediately that this is just another day for him. Smoking a cigar while standing on an icy mountain on a tiny little ledge is just yet another display of how great the characterization is in this game. Now, a quick side note, I was 9 years old when I played this game for the first time, so if you notice me calling Soap Captain McTavish, that's because I thought that's who it was until way later in the story. I didn't ever read the mission details as a 9-year-old, and his name is always McTavish when you hover over him, so I had no idea it was Soap, and I thought it was a big reveal later on. But while I do think the reveal would have been a cool thing, it is also cool to see how far Soap has come since being the FNG in COD 4. Anyways, your first task is to scale the icy mountainside, and it's not without its heart-pounding moments. You and Soap are behind enemy lines to recover an ACS module, which I never really understood as a kid, but the way I understand it now is that it is a device that contains the code for satellite tech to distinguish enemies from allies. Basically just a super important device that shouldn't be in the hands of the extremists. You and Soap are kitted out with heartbeat sensors, a new attachment at the time, that allows you to see enemies on a little screen attached to your gun in any condition, perfect for the blizzard you're experiencing now. Playing through the mission as an adult is obviously so much different than 15 years ago, but when Soap leaves you to provide Overwatch, that had my own heart beating out of my chest. I hated being alone, and somehow the snowstorm made the enemy base feel endless. You pick your way through enemies, relying heavily on your heartbeat sensor and Soap's guidance, and plant some explosives on a few fuel lines just in case things go bad, but surely that won't happen.
I've been compromised. Keep a low profile and hold your fire.
You reach the hangar that has the ACS module, and as you're grabbing it, you hear the bay doors creaking open as Soap tells you that you're compromised. You stick to the shadows and wait for the right moment to go to Plan B. After an intense gunfight, including picking off soldiers riding on snowmobiles, you have to take control of one of your own. Driving through the blizzard on your snowmobile brought back all the nostalgia for me, and that last big decline into the massive jump over the ravine had me feeling like I had just booted up my PS3 after school like the good old days. Cliffhanger is a masterpiece of a mission. It keeps you on edge, the snowstorm and heartbeat sensor combo adds a fun dynamic twist, and Soap leaving you on your own adds a sense of control that you've never really got to experience before, even if it was still linear. As a follow-up to the intro, this mission let you know that the Marine side would probably be a bit more grounded and traditional military-style fighting, while the 1-for-1 would be absolutely over the top in the best way possible. You're back with Shepard and Alan as he lays out the plan to infiltrate Makarov's ranks. Now that Roach and Soap were successful, expectations are even higher. He tells you that it cost a lot to put you in this situation already, and lets you know that whatever you're gonna have to do will cost even more.
This man Makarov is fighting his own war and he has no rules, no boundaries. He doesn't flinch at torture, human trafficking, or genocide. He's not loyal to a flag or a country or any set of ideals. He trades blood for money. He's your new best friend. You don't want to know what it's cost already to put you next to him. It will cost you a piece of yourself. It will cost nothing compared to everything you'll save.
Even with the warnings, nothing could prepare you for what's to come. So begins No Russian.
С нами Бог. Remember, no Russian.
Every second that passes before your group opens fire seems never ending. As your screen fades in, hearing the elevator dings, seeing the location, pulling out the massive light machine gun with hundreds of bullets, only for the doors to open up to a crowd of everyday civilians. You can't help but feel a sense of desperation. Shepard said it would cost you a piece of yourself, and that it did. Whether you try to be a quote-unquote good guy and avoid shooting at all, or if you play your role and act like you're part of this massacre, no one forgets the first time they played No Russian. Before most statements, you have to put arguably, or in my opinion, but there's no doubt, this is the most infamous and controversial mission ever made not just in Call of Duty, but possibly in gaming. Your squad mows down everyone in sight, letting no one escape. It's like the developers taped your eyes open and force you to soak everything in with how slow they allow your character to move. You walk through the chaos, making slow progression, forcing you to look in every direction and take it all in. Through the insanity, your mind starts to wander from the slaughter. Why would Makarov do this? This is a Russian airport, named for Zakhaev's legacy, the one that Makarov continues to fight for. But just as you start to wonder, the police force arrives, and you actually have to pay attention, as now the enemy can shoot back. Fighting the police force proves to be a decent challenge, as they use riot shields that require you to shoot your grenade launcher behind them to do any damage. Outside of that, the massacre continues, all the way until you make it to a hangar bay where an ambulance awaits, and Makarov tells you to hold your fire.
We've sent a strong message with this attack, Makarov.
That was no message. This is a message.
The Americans thought he could deceive us. When they find out why, all of Russia will cry for war.
Makarov had planned this all along, and suddenly, the infinitely badass Shepard, with his ultimate confidence and nonchalant bravery, seems nothing in comparison to what Makarov will do to win the war. No Russian set the tone for what this game would be. Nothing is against the rules. Nothing is left on the table. And for the player, it told us that the developers weren't leaving anything on the table either. What massive balls, for a lack of a better term, they had to include this. To be fair, the world was nowhere near the level of sensitive it is today, but My god, man, this mission is still insane to this day. Like I said, even if you choose not to shoot anyone, you still have to sit there and watch. Move your character forward at the slowest walking speed known to man, and watch it happen all around you. Each mission so far established a main player in the story. The first one being Shepard, the next Soap and Roach, and finally Makarov. The way they did this is so masterful, because you start to think, who could go up against these guys? Shepard's speeches could rally the entire country to fight, and Soap and Roach are each worth 1,000 men on their own. And then Makarov tears it all down in seconds. It makes you feel vulnerable, like you're right alongside the characters and finding a way to beat them, and it lets you know what a wild ride you're in for the rest of the game. After the absolute bombshell Makarov dropped in No Russian, the team is left scrambling for answers. The Russians are seething for war. They all believe that the Americans were to blame for the massacre. So with nothing else to go on except for used bullet casing, the team heads to the heart of Brazil to pursue the only lead they have. I think now is a good time to step back from the mission itself to appreciate just how many different settings there are in this campaign. Obviously, we aren't even halfway through yet, but we've already been across the world and back, and each one is a full-fledged area with characteristics of the country you're in. It's not really just one little building or a single condensed village. We'll see several more unforgettable settings, but I just wanted to point it out early on so you can have it in the back of your mind, compared to something like World at War, where although the missions may have been great, especially the American side got so repetitive. It was just jungle, bunker, over and over. You pull up after tailing some militia and have a quick and easy chase on foot to secure a person of interest. Soap and Ghost take some time to hang out with your new friend while you continue the search for the real target. The fighting in Rio is once again different than anywhere else as well. There are civilians everywhere, and the militia swarm from the rooftops, hidden alleyways, and shoot through wooden doors. I remember as a kid, man, these missions were tough. It always seemed like as soon as you started to progress, they would start spawning behind you, and a lot of them use shotguns, which even on regular difficulty hit hard. I'm not gonna lie, I definitely did die quite a few times on this one, so maybe now is a good time to quickly shout out the philosophical quotes that pop up when you die. I always appreciated those and thought it was a great idea rather than just fading to black and spawning right back in. Outside of the difficulty, the mission isn't much in the way of story except for tracking down your target. Soap absolutely WWE from the top ropes your target onto a car from the second story window, and once again the idea that Soap is a badass is just solidified in your mind. Did he just sense with his aura that the car down there would soften their fall, or was he perfectly fine with absolutely shattering the spine of the guy you're chasing? Who knows, but he looked good diving out of that window, so who cares. Back with the Rangers, we quickly find out why the ACS module shouldn't have been in enemy hands. It turns out the ACS module we retrieved had already been copied, so now the enemy has launched a full-scale invasion into the US, and we didn't know about it until the planes started shooting.
Running diagnostics to scan for malfunction.
The skies are clear, Station. You've got yourself some phantom dots. Over.
Zulu X-Ray 6, signs in your sector of some 100 bogies. Please advise.
Negatory, Station. Scope is clear. I don't know what to tell you. Solar interference, heavy sunspot activity today.
Sierra Delta, we may have a minor ACS fault here. Do you have anything on your scope? Sierra Delta, repeat.
I'm looking at fighter jets over I-95! How the hell did they get through?
This is the mission where the developers proved that this wasn't just going to be another good Call of Duty game. The level of passion they put into this mission showed that they were going all out for both sides of the story and weren't going to take any breaks. At first, the gameplay steps aside to the passenger seat and everything else takes over. The desperate radio chatter, the score of music dampening the mood even further, the enemies literally raining down from the sky, and all while driving through your average American neighborhood with families' homes getting torn to shreds. This game knew what it was doing when it came to the player's emotions. Your team is sent to support the American forces that are being overwhelmed and to protect a high-value friendly. It starts to set in as you progress just how bad it really is. The Americans had no idea this was coming, and we weren't ready for it in the slightest. The second half of this mission is largely iconic due to the setting. It's just a normal little town with a diner, a gas station, and a fast food joint called Burger Town. But now the gameplay takes back over and you have to hole up in each of these buildings while waiting for reinforcements. It's super satisfying picking off enemies with the intervention and the EBR, and when you get the Predator and see all those red squares, it just brings a smile to your face. It really is super simple. It's almost like you're playing a live-action tower defense game, but man, there's something so satisfying about it that just makes it a joy to play. After holding out for what seems like hours, finally the convoy arrives. but you know that you're going to have a long fight ahead of you. Back in Brazil with the 141, you got some information on a lead, and now you just have to make it out of the favela alive. There's not really much going on here story-wise for this one, so we'll kind of skip through a bit, but once again, this is a super challenging one. The ending chase sequence is a fun twist that gets your heart rate up a bit, but in the end, Nikolai saves the day once again.
Nikolai, we got him! Get us out of here! Where to, my friend? Just get us to the summer.
In a neighborhood in Virginia, you and your team are tasked with taking out some anti-air guns to start evacuating civilians. General Shepard takes control of your unit and calls in an armored vehicle that you can order around to take out enemies for you. You fight through the homes and take out the guns, and then move on to your secondary mission, extracting a high-value individual from a home nearby. Now, I haven't really looked into this much, but I'm not sure what role this played in the story exactly. Who are these guys, and what were the documents we picked up? Maybe they do talk about it later or even earlier on in the story, but I never made the connection, so let me know if y'all know anything about that one. After the invasion in the US, you would think that the 141 would be headed back stateside, but the intel they gathered from Brazil has them on a chase for a mysterious figure held in a historical prison on the edge of Russia, called the Gulag. Before a full-scale invasion of the Gulag though, the Russians have manned oil rigs in the ocean to set up air defenses to deter any attacks. You can't just blow them up because they've taken hostages. So of course, instead you simply ride through the frigid waters of the Pacific on a small torpedo launched from a submarine. Yet another iconic and memorable concept for a mission that only further proves the developers' creativity when it came to Modern Warfare 2. You emerge from the water with your squad and take down 2 unsuspecting guards. I can't imagine what was going through their heads because first of all, what are guards doing in the middle of the ocean? They're just looking at each other like the only possible way that they would have something to do is if something came from the water, so what are they doing? But anyway, the mission is basically a series of breach and clears where you have to take out enemies while making sure you don't accidentally shoot any hostages. The gameplay is entertaining for sure, the visuals are stunning, in the middle of the ocean, surrounded only by water and icebergs. This is one of those missions that doesn't really get much appreciation, solely due to how good the rest of the game is. It's fun, but story-wise, it's just a required pre-step to getting to the Gulag. After the hostages are safe, your task force hops on a chopper and you get a quick glimpse of the mission to come.
Is secure. I repeat, local airspace is secure. Proceed on course to target area along Route November 2.
Man, I don't know how many times I have to say it, but the amount of absolute bangers this game has never been matched since. I've already lost count of how many not just memorable, but iconic missions there are in this game. The build-up from the in-between screen shows just how cool this place is. A literal castle with a dungeon fitted with modern-day defenses. It'll definitely be a challenge to take over, but once you load in to see the forces that the 141 has at their disposal, you know that nothing will stand in their way. You circle the castle's outer walls in your chopper, picking off their defenses while sniping midair. The simple changes that continue to add to the gameplay keeps it so entertaining and dynamic. Each mission feels fresh. To that point, I finished this campaign over 2 days, whereas something like World at War took me a couple weeks or so, just because sometimes it felt like a drag to get through. As you snipe away from your perch on the chopper, it becomes clear that there are 2 aspects to this invasion. One being the 141, which is after Prisoner 627, and then there's the Navy, who just want to blow the place up. So not only will you be fighting against heavy defenses, you're against the clock with an impatient group of fighter jets above, waiting to blow the place to ash. So your team gets dropped off in the middle of the courtyard, and the invasion commences. It was cool to see the full might of the 141 come together like this, and I appreciate the time they took to give each one of these guys a cool name rather than just Private Smith or something along those lines. Fighting through the prison provides close quarters combat and a fun dynamic that you can't always actually get to your enemy because of the prison bars. You descend deeper and deeper into the prison, making your way to the dungeon area, making a pit stop along the way at a massive weapons cache. After holding out in the weapons hub, you descend even further and have to fight through some dark corridors with enemies hiding in every corner. And let's just pretend like I have my night vision goggles on here because I didn't want to mess up any keybinds. I was playing on a controller emulator, so things were rough. Like anytime I interacted with something, it would also throw a grenade, but I finally got it figured out, so I just didn't want to touch anything. Another breach and clear leads to a shower area that's still being remade to this day, so it'll look familiar to the Warzone players out there. Making your way through this sewer system, it seems like Prisoner 627 may be a lost cause as the Navy rained down missiles from above. But one last breach and clear leads to the man himself, and the rest is history.
Who's Soap?
The reunion of Price and Soap had those that played the OG Modern Warfare smiling from ear to ear. Soap giving back the pistol that Price had slid him to kill Zakhaev all those years ago just puts the cherry on top. There had been no mention of Price before this, and reintroducing him halfway into the story was a twist that honestly I don't think a lot of us expected in the slightest. The reunion is short-lived though, as the Navy lost all their patience and decide now is the perfect time to start the bomb droppings. The high-stakes, desperate escape attempt is just that much better, with Price yelling at Soap, bringing that feeling back from 2 years ago. And as your actual player, Roach, you can't imagine what's going through his head. Who the hell is Soap? How in the world does Prisoner 627 know McTavish? And not only does he know him, but they seem extremely comfortable with each other. Finally, Soap's quick thinking gets you all out of there alive. The mission is just yet another masterpiece. I think it has to be the majority of people's favorite mission from this game, and it should be obvious why. It has it all. The gameplay is different, intense, and fun. The story is the most compelling it's ever been. The nostalgia of getting Price back hits so hard for those that have been playing since day one, and the setting of the mission is stunning. There's a reason the Gulag has been remade several times over. It's just an awesome place. Now, I would say that this mission would be MW2's magnum opus, the best of the best. And while, it can't get any better than perfection, but the rest of the game doesn't really get any worse either. The loading screen doesn't give you the instant satisfaction of knowing what it's like to have Price back. Instead, all you get is an emergency broadcast system for the US, as things have only went from bad to worse. You're in a bunker underground, with sparks flying everywhere, explosions overhead, and wounded lying on the floor. There's no evidence of where you are just yet, but as you walk through, it's clear that whatever's happening here isn't under control whatsoever. You rally with your squad and head out of the bunker. Radio chatter continues to show the desperation on the American side. The music swells, just as you see the Washington Monument come into view. This hits hard, man. Obviously, as Americans, the stigmas are just true. We all just assume we're untouchable, especially the Capitol in DC. But seeing it in ruin, seeing hundreds of enemies shooting at you from the windows of these important historical buildings, as dozens of soldiers fall all around you, like I said, they just know how to get at the player's emotions. Your team is trying to fight your way to the top of a building that's pinning down the evac site you were just in. Fighting in the office buildings in the US Capitol provides for yet another amazing setting. It's strange shooting at extremists through cubicles and through office bathroom doors, but that's what you have to do. Your team makes it to the top, taking out a nest on the corner of the building, and you take the opportunity to use some of the enemy's ordnance against them. The view is stunning. The entirety of DC is in ruin. The sky looks like it's on fire. And although you took over this building for a brief moment, you're already in danger of being overrun. So you make a run for it to the roof and board a chopper to do what you can from the air. It's inspiring, the last stand that you and your crew go on. You know there's no way you're gonna make it out. There are hundreds of RPGs firing at you by the second. Yet, you still push on to take out as many as you can. Finally, your chopper takes all the damage it can hold, and you go down in flames. You awake, battered and bruised, to see enemies flocking toward your position. As you start to run low on ammo, it's obvious that this is about to be the end for the Rangers. But then a strange, blinding light takes over your screen, and you're left wondering what the hell just happened.
Defend this position!
Back with the 141, you finally get to hear from Price, and the first ever loading screen with him is definitely one to remember.
General Shepard, you're online with Captain Price.
Back from the brink, Captain.
Out of the frying pan is more like it. This world looks more like hell than the one I just left.
We thought we'd recovered the ACS before the Russians could crack it. We were wrong. Then Makarov turned the US into his scapegoat. Next thing you know, there's flames everywhere. What's this image you're sending me?
You want to put out an oil fire, sir? You set off a bigger explosion right next to it. Sucks away the oxygen, snuffs the flame.
Price, you've been locked away too long. Better get your mind right, son.
Shepard, are you willing to do what is necessary to win?
Always.
We got ourselves a pretty big fire. Gonna need a huge bang.
You've been in the Gulag too long, Price. Focus on taking out Makarov.
No time, sir. We need to end this war today.
I'm not asking you, Price. This is an order. You're to...
Looks like we lost our connection.
This point in the story reminds me of what reading a really good book is like. You end one chapter on a massive cliffhanger, but you finally get the satisfaction of following up on the other perspective from a few chapters ago. The story and pacing of this game was just done so masterfully, it's so impressive. You load into a snowy forest, with Captain Price and a suppressed sniper in hand. Just as you get through the guns blazing gameplay of the Gulag and the Rangers missions in the capital, you're hit with a stealthy, slower mission at just the right time. You slip right back into that blissful satisfaction of taking out enemies at the exact same time as your partner, and you easily pick your way through the icy forest, with only one small hiccup along the way. Then the mission takes a sharp turn right back into open fighting as you slide down an icy slope. The Predator missile is so satisfying to use in this game. I'm not sure what it is, but I just love pulling out that little console and getting to drive basically a little RC plane that happens to be a missile of mass destruction. You fight your way through heavy resistance, and along the way, this may be a familiar spot to the special ops players out there, but your objective is to make it to this Russian sub that's armed with nukes. Once there, Price goes in alone as you and your squad take the high ground to hold off any reinforcements. Price goes radio silent, and just as the mission seems to be a failure, there's yet another twist in the story.
Price, do you copy? The silo doors are open! I repeat, the silo doors are open!
You replay the final stand with Ramirez, and now it all starts to click. The title of the mission, The Blinding White Light. Price really did send a nuke to Washington, D.C. After the white light hits again, you change perspectives to an astronaut on the International Space Station. You see the missile breach the horizon, and the scale of what just happened really sets in. But it looked like the bomb detonated in the atmosphere rather than on land, and now Price's plan starts to take shape. Back on the ground, you see the explosion in the air, but you're not immediately turned to ash. The nuke created an EMP that ruined all electronics. Helicopters plummet, planes crash, everything is chaos, but it gives the Americans the chance they need to fight back.
This isn't good, man! Whoa! Don't stop, keep moving! Holy shit! Go, go, go! What the hell's going on? EMP! Just keep moving! Look out! Go, go! Shit's falling from the sky, we're screwed, man. We're totally hooked. Get it, Pip Corporal.
The eerie quiet after the initial insanity of the EMP is done so well. Without comms, the Rangers are forced to use callouts to ensure they aren't shooting any friendlies. Lone Soldier tells you that the US is staging a counterstrike at Whiskey Hotel. Once again, the setting is just spectacular. The destruction is so complete. It leaves you feeling that even if the Americans do take back control, it couldn't really be counted as a win. A direct continuation of the last mission, your team makes their way through the presidential bunker that has been completely destroyed along with everything else. Once again, you emerge from the depths to see the enemy firing at you from every window of another building in the capital. The gameplay is very similar to the last few Rangers missions, but honestly, the story progression is well worth it. Hundreds of teams are spread out amongst several buildings. Your mission is to reach the top, to pop green flares to let the air support know that the building isn't lost. If you don't make it in time, they'll level the buildings to eliminate any hostiles. This shows just how desperate the Americans are at this point. They're so far gone that they're willing to completely bomb their own buildings to ensure the enemy doesn't have control. But of course, your team does push through just in time to make it to the top, and you start to see green flares popping up all around, giving the first glimpse of hope that the Americans may just make it out of this. This is the end of the Rangers story in this game, and what a perfect way to end it was. It reminds me a lot of Empire Strikes Back in Star Wars. The whole game, we basically were getting it handed to us by the Russians on our own soil. We saw the US at its lowest point, and just as we start to make progress, chipping away at what it will take to fight back, the game ends, leaving us to wait 2 whole years to get our revenge. I feel like this is such a big issue in modern games and just overall storytelling. The writers are afraid of loss. They don't want us to see the characters at their lowest point. They want us to seem invincible and to always win. And sure, maybe we will end up winning in the end, but this game will make that payoff infinitely more rewarding. The US Rangers side provides the blueprint for exactly how a two-perspective story should be. Like I said early on, the 141 side is usually over the top, high intensity gameplay, very dynamic, but still has a compelling story. The Ranger side focuses more on emotion. Sure, I think the gameplay is still a good time, especially the Burger Town mission, but overall it is pretty similar. They focused mainly on the dialogue, the characterization, the music, and the setting. It inspires us to yearn for revenge, just like Corporal Dunn's final words, and it undoubtedly gives us something to look forward to with the next game. With that said, it's time to wrap up the 141 side, and to no surprise, it's going to be an absolute roller coaster as well. The 141 split up to follow two leads on the last places Makarov could be hiding out. The attacks happen simultaneously, but first you're with Ghost and Roach taking a safe house in Russia. The mission starts with an ambush that catches you and the 141 off guard, mainly because the ambush starts with bouncing Bettys that only make an appearance in this one part of the campaign and aren't seen anywhere else in the game to my knowledge. Anyway, after surviving the ambush and pushing through to the safe house, your team does a series of breach and clears to take over. The mechanics of these are just so satisfying. The slow motion picking off of enemies that are all reeling from the unexpected explosions just never get old. There are no signs of Makarov, but the place is riddled with intel. So Ghost sets up a download to get all the info you can, while you have to set up with your squad to protect the computer. Of course, you are in the middle of nowhere, so the internet is extremely shoddy. So the defense of the estate seems to last forever. And let me tell you, it is not easy. Somehow, the random RPGs that are shot from a mile away make it through every tiny little window. You kill yourself with your own claymores, and the endless waves of enemies just make this so challenging. After making your stand, you and what's left of your team make a run for it to exfil. The defense of the safe house alone would make for a pretty memorable and fun mission in today's day and age. But of course, it isn't that simple. This is Modern Warfare 2.
You have the DSM. We got it, sir.
Good. That's one less loose end.
What the f? The music, them just tossing your bodies to the side, Price calling over the comms to not trust Shepard just seconds too late, Shepard tossing a cigar casually onto your bodies. What the hell, man, this game. These were two massive main characters, and they're gone like nothing. Not even to Makarov, but to your own general, the one you've been taking orders from the whole game. I don't think this betrayal was on anyone's radar. You just finished the finale mission with the Rangers, feeling that sense of hope, only for it to be torn down in seconds by someone on your own side. Soap calls out in despair over the comms, and Price, being the veteran that he is, knows what went down. How many times am I going to say in this video how good this game is? How many video game stories could easily be made into a movie that would undoubtedly turn into a blockbuster hit? The twists and turns of this game leave you speechless. With no time to dwell on what just happened, after a short loading screen, you're thrust back into the action, finally taking control of Soap, just like old times. Your objective is simple: make it back to Price and Nikolai. After the turn of Shepard and his men, you have to make your way through a scrapyard, fighting against both sides and letting them fight each other when you can. This gameplay is basically just side entertainment for the conversation that's going on the comms while you fight your way through to Price. Reeling from the betrayal, Price does the unthinkable. He reaches out to Makarov for help.
Makarov, this is Price. Shepard's a war hero now. He's got your operations playbook, and give me what you got on Shepard, and I'll take care of the rest. Know you can hear me on this channel, Makarov. I both know you won't last a week.
And neither will you.
Makarov, you ever hear the old saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend?
Price, one day you're going to find that cuts both ways. Shepard is using Site Hotel Bravo. You know where it is. I'll see you now.
With the intel provided on Shepard's location from Makarov, you make your way to Price and an intense car chase ensues. You have to take control of the wheel and drive onto the ramp of a moving plane. Like I said, while this mission isn't boring and definitely isn't easy, the point of it was outside of the gameplay itself, which is a theme that the developers had down to a science in this game. They knew when and where to have the players focus on the entertaining value of the gameplay and when to rein it in to allow them to fully soak in the story. After making it to the plane, you get a legendary loading screen from Price.
Price?
The healthy human mind doesn't wake up in the morning thinking this is its last day on Earth. But I think that's a luxury, not a curse. To know you're close to the end is a kind of freedom. Good time to take inventory. Outgunned, outnumbered, out of our minds on a suicide mission. But the sand and rocks here, stained with thousands of years of warfare, they will remember us for this. Because out of all our vast array of nightmares, this is the one we choose for ourselves. We go forward like a breath exhaled from the earth, with vigor in our hearts and one goal in sight. We will kill him.
With that, you load in a SOAP as just you and Price head in to take down a base of who knows how many specially trained American soldiers by yourselves, just like old times. The first half sees you and Price stealthily slicing your way through Shepard's base, taking down several enemies before they know you're there. Even though the silence can't last forever, it doesn't matter. Soap and Price take down the entire base like it's just another day at the office. The fighting is intense, with the resistance increasing more and more as you get deeper into the base. Finally, nearing the end, Shepard's cowardice shows. He calls in an order to blow up the base, with us and several of his men still inside. We make it out just in time and fight through what's left of his men after the explosion, as we make it to a small cavern with a little river that Shepard is using to make his escape. The boat chase is the perfect way to cap off this game. It feels like this is the only thing we haven't done, so why not? The odds are stacked against you and Price, but you take out all the resistance, all while keeping up with Shepard's boat. The rapids prove to be a huge challenge to navigate, but as soon as you start to close in, Shepard cheats. He gets swooped up by his chopper just before a massive waterfall, leaving you and Price hopeless. But of course, Captain Price always has one more trick up his sleeve. The waterfall takes you, and you wake disoriented, with only a knife left to fight with. The sandstorm leaves the aftermath shrouded in mystery. As you stumble your way through, you can't know whether Price made it or if Shepard's even alive. You finally do catch a glimpse of Shepard, and you both make your way to where 1v1s have been settled since the beginning of time. But you're too disoriented, and Shepard doesn't seem to be too shaken up from his crash. While you bleed out, he tells you his side of the story.
5 years ago, I lost 30,000 men in the blink of an eye. And the world just fucking watched. Tomorrow, there will be no shortage of volunteers, no shortage of patriots. I know you understand.
Price saves you temporarily, but you can only sit and watch as he gets beaten down. In a last-ditch effort, you do the unthinkable. You and Price lay in the sand, completely spent. No one's coming for you. You told Nikolai this is a one-way trip, but of course, he comes through for you. With Soap bleeding out, and you, Price, and Nikolai against the world, the screen fades to black, and the credits roll. What a game. Truly perfect in my eyes. I was never bored. The story couldn't have been told in a more gripping way. Each character is developed so well, and at this point you're so invested in both Price and Soap and the Rangers that the 2-year wait for the follow-up left most of us in withdrawal. The musical score is masterful, perfectly encapsulating how the player feels in each moment and amplifying the gravity of each mission. The voice acting was phenomenal. The loading screens kept you interested and helped drive the story. Both sides were equally loved. The passion of the developers to make a beautiful game shone through, and the players appreciated it then and continue to appreciate it to this day. I have a little brother who has never gotten to experience the original series. The younger generation doesn't know what they missed out on, what Call of Duty stories used to be, and let me tell you, if you haven't played it for yourself, you absolutely should. I can't wait to see his reaction when playing these games. I wish for myself that I could play them over for the first time again. Now, let's take a second to talk about those of us who did experience this game at its launch and what we felt, because you can never emulate that feeling. We had waited 2 years for a continuation of the Modern Warfare story. We had to wait 2 more for the conclusion. In those waiting periods, you just can't replicate the connection one grows to these characters. You watch videos speculating what will happen, replay the games over and over, noticing smaller details about each one with every playthrough. The feeling reminded me of watching The Walking Dead as they were released. It was a global phenomenon, and as much as the show is still amazing to this day, binging it isn't nearly the same as having to wait week by week. You talk about it with your friends, theorize what will happen, and think about it often. That same level of connection can't be made when you aren't forced to wait, and although it is super satisfying to just go play the next game to see what happens, or go straight to the next episode, it just won't be the same. All that to say, I can totally understand if you played these games today and don't feel the same way as I do, but I'm one of those people that was lucky enough to build that connection, and because of that, it does just mean so much more. With all that said, I think it's obvious where this one is going on the list. Every mission is iconic in its own way. The characters at this point are a household name, and the twists and turns of this story are just impossible to predict. The game doesn't provide one bit of resolution. Makarov is nowhere to be found. The Rangers are rearing for a counterattack on Russia. The 141 is in shambles, and it sets up the next game perfectly. I'm giving Modern Warfare 2 a 10 out of 10. S tier.